Psst. The snows are deep in Stalingrad. What's that? No, I wasn't talking to you. But since you're here, let's talk about Dead Drop, the new microgame from Crash Games and Jason Katarsky, which is a 13-card microgame all about deduction and deduction. Mostly about deduction, actually. So in this game, we've got a 13-card deck with cards numbered 0 through 5, and this is the spy theme deck, which has a whole bunch of different secret agents on all of the cards. One of the cards is dealt out face down, and your goal is to try to figure out which card that is. But unlike a lot of deduction games, just knowing the answer isn't going to be enough to actually win you the game. So let me give you an example of gameplay real quick, and then we'll come back and I will talk about why I think this is one of the best microgames, if not the best one, that I have in my collection. So, alright, check this out. This is a 3-player game. Each of us is going to have 3 cards, secret, that only we know. 3 cards for us. There's 3 cards in the middle. These are called the stash. Everybody knows what they are. And then this is the drop. Like I said, that's the secret card. In order for me to figure out where a card is, there's basically 3 things I can do on my turn. First thing I can do is just give somebody a card, and they're going to have to give me a different card from their hand back. Now, that's a decent way of getting information. It doesn't give up too much either. I know about one more card, you know about one more card, but as soon as we've already done one of these trades, you could just give me the same card I've already seen back, meaning that I'm not going to gain anything. And I could do the same thing to you, so you wouldn't gain anything. So quickly we're going to end up sort of stalemating there. Unless we think that one of the other of us has gotten rid of all of the cards we've already seen. The second thing that we can do is swap with the stash. This is a little bit of a trickier proposition. I can put down a card here in the stash and then take up any one of the cards from the stash. And that just loses me information, or rather it gives everybody else information. One of the cards that was secret in my hand is now public, and the card that was public is now secret in my hand, but presumably everybody saw what it was and can sort of keep track of that information. So why would I ever want to do that? Well, the third thing that I can do is ask somebody for a specific card in their hand, go fish style. But in order to do that, I have to have the right cards. So for example, let's say that I'm looking for the 4. I don't see it in my hand, and it's not out there in the middle, so I need to start asking around to see if I can find where it is. And in order to do that, I need 2 cards that add up to 4. If I secretly show this player these 2 cards on my turn, and they happen to have in their hand the 4, they're going to have to give me the 4, and I have to give them one of the cards I showed them. At the end of my turn, I can do the exact same thing to try to make an accusation against what this card is. Now, I saw that it was... it's not the 4. That guy has the 4. There's a 1 there. The 3's here. I don't know where the 5 is. But it doesn't really matter if it's the 5 because I can't make a 5 with the cards I have in my hand. In order to do that, I'm going to need to either get a 2 or a 1. And there's an easy way to do that, but if everybody sees me going for that and they know what cards I have in my hand, they might be able to guess what I'm going to guess. So even without me having the right information, or without them having the right information, the same information I have, they might be able to guess this. Now what's interesting is that the guess for what card the drop is done at the end of the turn, separately from your action. So I could ask him for that 4, get it, and then make a guess as to what this was at the same time. So the way that I guess is I put out 2 cards. This is an awful guess because there's only 1 4 in the deck, but just to be an example. I lay out my 2 cards, what I think it is. I'm going to look at the card. If I'm wrong, put it back face down. All my cards are now out face up. If I'm right, I reveal it and I win the round. And that's the gist of the game. So let's go back to my talking face for a second here. Alright, so that's Dead Drop. Now, Dead Drop takes this whole card counting, card distribution thing that a lot of microgames try to do. Love Letter kind of does it. And it makes it the focus of the game, and it just cuts out all the other stuff that could be in the microgame, and it's a lot better for it, I think. So My favorite part of Love Letter. Love Letter is not like my favorite thing to play. Everyone was kind of crazy about it for a little while, and I'm kind of a hipster. I don't know. So, but my favorite thing about Love Letter is when you play the guard and you look at the cards on the table and you kind of play the odds and figure out a little bit maybe about how that person's been acting, and you're like, you are the wizard, and then they flip over their card and they're the wizard, and you're like, yeah, I got him. But that doesn't win you the game in Love Letter. But it does win you the game here. It's actually kind of the whole thing. It basically is my favorite part of a lot of those microgames, and it's the real focus to dead drop. So that's a plus. Another thing that's a plus is that among microgames, I think this is probably the most thematic one that I've played. And I didn't think it would be at first. So Crash sent me this. They sent me a little note with it that said, this game is inspired by a particular spy-themed television show. And I was like, yeah, right. It's a 13-card deck with cards numbered 0 through 5. Are you telling me that it's inspired by some... How is it inspired by the show? As I played it, I kind of found out that the thinking that you're doing in the game is really reminiscent of the types of situations that come up in spy fiction. So it's not just the art, it's also sort of the mechanism here, I think, is really well suited to that theme. Like, if I have multiples of a card and you're trying to trade me, I can safely give up one of them knowing that I still have the other one and you don't know that I have it. So that's like a situation where I've got maybe 2 informants in your organization and you're like, oh, you have informants in my organization. I'm like, yeah, I have 1 informant in your organization and I'm just going to give them over to you. But I don't have any more and there's no way for you to prove it, right? But then maybe you turn right around and you do have a way to prove it. You immediately ask me if I've got the other 3, and it turns out I do have the other 3, and so I just kind of got played, which feels like a situation from a spy movie. Although we're not the spies, we're like the spy masters, right? We're M. Which letter? M, I guess? We're the people behind the spies, kind of deciding which of our agents are important to hang on to at the moment, I guess. Anyway, it's actually pretty thematic, at least for that theme. I don't know how well that feeling of thematic immersion will carry on to being children or monsters or whatever other... there's a whole lot of different themes on the Kickstarter right now. I like this one the best for the game, but, you know, your mileage may vary. Anyway, those types of situations I just mentioned are really interesting because they introduce ambiguity into this. And a lot of the mechanisms of this game introduce ambiguity as well. For example, the thing where I'm kind of playing Go Fish with somebody, I have to show them 2 of my cards. And then they're going to look at those cards, and if they have one that matches, they're going to give me that card back, and I have to give them one of the 2 I showed them. But that all goes on without anybody else at the table having any idea what happened, which introduces a whole lot of guesswork, I guess, or ambiguity about exactly what cards are where. Like, if I just traded with somebody and I had a 3 before, and then that person trades with you and they give you a 3, is that the 3 that I had, or is it a different one? Did they have the other one? And you have to kind of be on your toes, keeping track of where you think cards went, which is really interesting and makes this a lot more than a straightforward, like, you know, clue style, cross things off the grid, and then when you only have 1 column left, that's the answer. Sometimes it does work out that way, but more often than not, it doesn't, except for in the 2-player game. So the 2-player game of this, I'm not incredibly fond of, because there's a bunch of different situations that can happen where someone can just like win really, really quickly. For example, because of the way that the turn structure is, you're able to do an action and then make a guess about what the drop is. There's a lot of times where someone could just be like, hey, do you have this? And you're like, no, I don't have that. And they're like, okay, well, that's the drop. But, which is not maybe the most satisfying. And additionally, there's really no way of introducing ambiguity into the 2-player game, because there's only 3 places cards can be on the table, in your hand or in your opponent's hand, and once you've seen one, it's kind of known where it is. The only thing that can kind of frustrate your attempt to just figure out where every single card is if one player has multiple of the same card, and they're really under no compulsion to give them to you, ever, and since there's no other players to trade with, there's not a lot of likelihood of you being able to like mine them entirely out of their hand. So it's a little frustrating comparatively. Now, I'm not saying that two-player game is awful. It's definitely still playable and it's still pretty interesting. It's just not as good as the 3 and 4-player games, which I think are kind of stellar. So if you're buying this to be an only two-player microgame, then A, I don't know who you are, and B, I don't know. There's probably some other microgame that's a little bit better with two than this one. Although off the top of my head, I can't really think of one. So maybe that's just how that works. But at the higher player counts, this is staggeringly more fun than anything else of its size that I've played. So if you're into microgames and you're into any of the 39,000 themes that they've got going on, particularly the Spy one, because that one's great, then go check out Dead Drop on Kickstarter right now from Jason Kotarski and Crash Games. See you guys later.